Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to host today the presentation of Professor Cavalcante. This will be our last webinar in political philosophy hosted by California State University. Professor Cavalcante is originally from Brazil, but she teaches at Southern University in Sweden. She worked extensively on Martin Heidegger. She translated important works of his and wrote extensively. I mean, we have several titles of book of hers. Today, in particular, she's going to present on the fascism of ambiguity, a very important subject for nowadays conversations. So it's absolutely my pleasure, Marcia, to have you today, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Susie, very much. Thank you for the invitation. We didn't met before until now. It was really a pleasure to see you and also a pleasure to be here. A pleasure and a displeasure, because I would say that the work I've been doing on the new form of fascism that is slowing up our bodies, our souls today is something I would prefer not to do. So to use the Melville form. So, but we are here and we are facing what I consider a very difficult challenge, because we are not facing, in my view, there are many discussions about what's happening today. So everybody has somehow lost the more solid, or how to say, secure grounds to understand the phenomena. So we have a lot of knowledge in political philosophy, a lot of knowledge about fascism, about authoritarianism, and so on. But at the same time, we get surprised today and ask, how is it possible? And the question I think we have to take seriously is, why does, what is the surprise? In where? How can we describe the surprise? And I think the big challenge is first to understand that we are facing a moment of history that, in my view, is a moment of mutation. It's not a moment of crisis. It's not a moment of loss of means, accessibility, all that is somehow also belong to. But to say and to use the concept of mutation means that we are facing something that we can no longer conceive in terms of a metaphysics of transformation. We cannot say that it was a form before that then disformed or unfold in this sense from a more teleological view or less, but we are dealing with not even a form, maybe an formless structure, or not even a structure, but an structureless, formless situation or phenomenality that demands from us new ways of thinking, but to which we don't have. So I would say that, I'm sorry if you hear too much an airplane. Are you here? An airplane? Oh, it's okay. Because I live here in Rio and there is some airplanes traffic. But mutation means the concepts and the theoretical framework in which we are educated and used to work on is no longer sufficient to face what we are facing. And at the same time, we don't have new conceptuality. So we have neither the old nor a new. So we are in this kind of theoretical limbo. So that's why it is easier to go back and say, because we recognize some forms from old experience of fascism, authoritarianism, but at the same time, we experience a kind of uneasy. It's not quite the same. So the challenge is to understand what is new, understand what's going on, and to grasp something that is going on means that we are trying to grasp a realm of ungraspability, I would say. So there are a lot of debates, you know, or your landman in Traverso, you have a lot of contemporary political philosophers and thinkings, and we have a debate on how to name this right wing, how to say, stream all over the world. And some people don't want to use the concept of fascism because they think fascism is what happened, and above all in Italy, no? Or perhaps you could stand to Franco, Spain, and so on, but it's a historical context. And other, as Enzo Traverso or even Alberto Toscano, they try to use the concept of fascism, but they have an idea that it is a later fascism, or it is a kind of post-fascism, or so. The difficulty is how to face this uniqueness and newness of the phenomena. So my proposal is that first, I think we have to call what's happening fascism, but fascism in a certain sense. Fascism almost in a kind of etymological sense, because fascism, coming from the word fascio, it has to do with this bound of threads around a dead iron axe. This was the form that we still have in some buildings in France. We have this in the building architecture building of the Legislative Assembly in Rio de Janeiro, and in the Swedish police. They use these symbols without knowing what does it mean, maybe, but it's still there. But what is what I try to justify the use of this very etymological, almost simple use of the word fascism, it does because the new form of fascism has to do with a way of coexistence that destroys coexistence. So it's not a new form of regime, it's not a new kind of political party and so on. No, it's really a social praxis which destroys the social practice. So this is a fundamental thesis in my book or in my work to justify the use of the concept of fascism to grasp what's going on now. This means that we have not, of course, we can recognize characteristics from the old and historical fascism. I've been very inspired in my readings and attempts to develop what I call more of a conceptual essay than a rigid and finished conceptuality, but is a kind of sketching, a thinking, what is in process. I was very inspired by the writings of Pier Paolo Pasolini, also your landsman. And Pasolini, I think, had the very visionary vision, if you could say in a more tautological form, to understand that what is fascism now is not a regime, it's not a party, it's the new form of capitalism itself. So it's not that there is a regime, that there is a fascist, that there is a figure, like we have these big figures today that we should discuss how to understand, but it has to do with how the new form of capitalism, which is technical, he called this video technical, so it has to do with the media, and we have to add the financial. So we have a new structure of the world economic order. So capitalism itself has mutated. It is capitalism, of course, but it has a new form. And this form, to understand, is absolutely essential to grasp what I call the fascism of ambiguity. So why, I would say, why ambiguity? That has been, since I coined this term, there have been a lot of questions because, of course, whatsoever form of fascism, of authoritarianism, or totalitarianism, whatsoever form is always univoc. You know what it is. No, of course. And then people say, but why you call ambiguity? This is not ambiguous. We know precisely that it is. No, of course. But ambiguity is treated in my work as rather as a verb. So this univocity, unequivocity, let us say, of fascism, of the new form of fascism, is realized, is really exercised through a politics of meaning, through a continuous ambiguization of all senses and values. So ambiguity means really a mean, almost a technique in which every meaning and sense and values are being ambiguized. It's not by chance that in the internet you have this disambiguization of the time, that asking for you to disambiguize. So it is a continuous ambiguization of all meanings. We know that the new form of capitalism, which I'm considering immediately as a new form of fascism, has to do with the financialization of capitalism. So we are no longer dealing with classical liberal capitalism in which you have a certain concept and practice of work, you have a certain way of economic and productive relations in which you have social relations. It's that is the problem. We have a financialization of the capital, means that we no longer have products. We are in the absolute world of merchandise, commodification, of exchange values, that exchange even every use values. So there are so many very good analyses of that today that you certainly have studied and discussed. But what I think that I can contribute is that to understand that the central mechanism of every commodification is not only that everything becomes merchandise, becomes commodity, and thereby, we can say, becomes gets rich exchange value that exterminate almost and substitute the use values, it is the very core of that procedure is that not only that everything becomes is reduced to monetary value, but the axle of that is what I have called anythingization. Everything becomes whatsoever to be used of whoever, whenever, for whatever purpose. So it is a very dynamic instructor of substitutions, exchangeability, in which everything has to lose their ontological dimension. So we have a process of continuous deontologization of everything, in order to receive whatsoever re-ontologization depending on the interest and purpose. So what we see there is a dynamic in which we have an exacerbation of meaning, senses, and values in which meaning, senses, and values become empty. So we have a process of emptization, of becoming void of every meaning, sense, and values. That is the dynamic I try to explain as being the very core of this process of continuous ambiguization. I think, in my view, this is the strongest weapon for a fascist politics. That's why we see all the time a politics of threat and perhaps. Maybe I will invade, maybe not. I invade. When you think I not invade, I invade. I bomb, maybe not. I threat. It is all the time where everybody knows this is a play, this is a game, but it's also a reality at the same time. So all our oppositions that we have been used to work with, to oppose game or play to reality, to oppose positive to negative, to oppose good and evil, all these oppositions, they are unmade continuously, and they are interchanged. So all the time you can see, and this is what many decades and even centuries ago, Marx was very clear when he was young, in his young writings from 1844, when he's discussing money before the Capital, he's saying money is not a number. Money is meaning. And money is ambiguity of meaning. And his example is, if you have a lot of money, if you are ugly, you become beautiful. If you have a lot of money. So all this is not only a psychological relation and so on, is a structure of what is monetary value. So this is why I think we have to understand. And then the other step in my reflections is why this is fascist. And the very important thing in that is how that's why I don't think it's enough to describe the financialization of capital. This is a very fundamental aspect to understand the new form of fascism, but we have to add the technical, mediatical, social, robotization, algorithmization, and so on. And I think this is something that we have to think together. It's not at all thought together more explicitly, because we cannot keep in my view, a little naive vision that technology is only a mean to realize things, but technology is the dynamic as such. And this means that all our categories of reality, time, space, and embodiment, they are absolutely transmutated. That is the big problem now. That's why we have this phone, this simple thing, that if the whole world would throw away this, is a very little object. It's very easy to throw away. If the whole world would throw away, we have a total revolution, and absolute, the most radical. But we are all enslaved in that. But it's not only that we are enslaved, because it is also in this sense a mean in which the financialization of the capital operates, but we have to understand that how this cyber, algorithmic, and so on, is a strategy of automation of our autonomy. So what I see as a big problem today to understand is that we see in the cyber technological, whatsoever, digital, and all the AI and everything, is the automation of our autonomy and the autonomization of automation. So automation becomes autonomous, and autonomy becomes automation, automatic. So this is a central thesis there. And that's why when I was writing about this, a word came to me. You know, now with all languages, we can speak all languages. We have ChatGPT to translate everything. You have many languages all the time. It's a logo, how to say, logo craziness. Now we live in the age of the logos is crazy. It's everywhere. Is that it came to me a word. Many new words come all the time. It's an invention of words, very all over the world. And a word that came to me was cyberocracy. Cyberocracy. We are no longer in the technique of bureaucracy. We have the work of Claude Lefort, who worked so much about bureaucracy in relation to Soviet totalitarianism. But we are in the age of cyberocracy. And I was, what a clear word I have to develop now. And then I made a Google search, just in case. And what I discovered, this word has been coined in the 70s by the American Intelligence Service. There is a document, almost 90 pages, in which the American Intelligence Service understood that cyberocracy is the future. This was for me a discovery. I really didn't know. So it's still, I didn't have the opportunity, but I would like to make really a seminar with more even technical people to understand what is happening there. We can read like this as a philosopher, but it would be interesting to discuss with more IT people, which are, of course, more engaged with a non-fascist use of this. But but for me, the huge phenomenon, and this is not in the document, of course, is this, how to say, two sides of the same coin of the relation between automation and autonomy. Because, as you know, you define automation and autonomy in the same terms. in the history of philosophy. It has to do with self-movement, self-reference, to do by yourself, for yourself, through yourself, in itself. So it is a whole machine of the self, which is, at the same time, the fundamental, categorical, philosophical embasement of Western civilization. It is the civilization of the self. We know as philosophers that auto is the most important word in philosophy. Autarkia, autonomy, and you have such a huge dictionary of words built upon auto, which is even the third personal pronoun in Greek. And what is interesting is that in the first dictionary of philosophy written by Aristotle in the Metaphysics, the book Delta, you have the main concepts of philosophy, being, the one, accident, substance, and so on. There is one concept missing, auto, upon which all the definitions are somehow referring to, or in reference to which they are being built. So this is quite interesting to reflect upon. But I think this is a problem. But what I see then is that the very fascist form is this continuous politics of ambiguization of meaning, senses, and values, through which meaning, senses, and values, on the one hand, become empty and can be filled with whatsoever meaning, value, and sense. And at the same time, on the other hand, meaning, value, and senses lose their meaning, their sense, and their values. So that's why it is much more than a retrocess to old values. And I think what maybe I differ from some political philosophers is that when I see these claims, such as Trump's and Bolsonaro and Orban and the Swedish far right, which is really, in this year we have elections in Sweden, it's very dangerous that Sweden will be a right-wing government for the first time. Yeah. And what I see is not simply a retrocess coming back to old values. This is the form. I'm not sure, or maybe I would say I am almost sure that it does not have to do with coming back to old values, family, property, tradition, and so on, because since many decades, the nation, tradition, and so on, they are commodities as well. A nation today is a commodity. So we have to understand the contradiction of protectionist politics, protectionist economic politics. Now, of course, American has to have and possess material resources, have to invade, take Venezuela, take the oil, and then go to Iran. So everything is very planned, very clear, but has to do with having the possession and the property of the rare materials or critical materials, rare earth, everything that we need to the technological, cyber-technological revolution, let us say, of economy. But it is in the name of nationalism, but this nationalism is already a commodification of the nation as such. So we have to understand, because capital is no longer national. It cannot go back. Capital is transnational. There is no possibility. You have so many involved. Of course, they are the few owners, the few owners. there are there and so on, but the very capital, let us say, is transnational. So we have to understand why there is a need to have a kind of mask or form of the already known, the old values and the old, how to say, contents, but they are as if they would be the quest, in my view. So we have to understand the world of the simulacro and of simulation, which is so fundamental for this new form of fascism, which is the new form of capitalism. I think that to reread Jean Baudrillard is important. Baudrillard is an important author for this way of how he saw this question of the simulacrum and simulation, of course. And so I don't know, I don't know if it would be enough to start a discussion, or if you want me to talk a little bit more, but tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, this is illuminating. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a few students online and two on Zoom. Is there any of you who wants to bring up a question at this point? I don't know. I was struck by something that I felt actually. While you were talking, there were many moments in which I was resonating with you. My specialty is not political philosophy, so it's not something that I sit at a table and reflect on it. So it's something I'm living. And when you said this is not crisis, this is transformation at the very beginning, and
Mutation.
what?
Mutation.
Mutation. Yeah, it's absolutely, yeah, something that I felt. It is true, we have the words, but we cannot see where we are going. Because, yeah, as you said, the technology is so ingrained in the way in which it's changing the structure of our body, of our being. Because, as you were saying, with the phones, we can be. We are not just one body, right? We can be anywhere at any time. We are bombed by information. So, yeah, it's really hard to see this mutation and to avoid the ambiguity in what we're seeing, right? Because we want to bring meanings, values, a being that is our being, and not this flow of reels, of videos, of data that changes continuously. How? How do we do that? Because at the same time, capitalistic society is structured in such a way that utilitarism, utilitarian ethics is the ethics. So we kind of consider good, being able to be productive, being able to flow, to lose these meanings. Um, so, where do we start from? I mean, I'm at the beginning of not at the beginning, middle maybe of my teaching career. I need to bring something positive to my students, to my writing, not necessarily something positive, but something, the ontology, as you were saying, the meaning, value, something that stays, that you can touch. Where I start from? What do you think? And another thought that was crossing my head in this blob of in this cluster of thoughts was Han. Byung-Chan, I always Byung-Chul Han, I always cut his name, about the culture of emergency and of extreme positivity. Yes, I can. Yes, I do. And then we become slaves of I have to rush. I have to respond. I have to be able to do. So maybe doing is not the answer. Tell me, what do you think? Give me your
I think
take on
what
this.
is important to understand with this mutation of capitalism itself, because we have to understand that it has to do with the imbrication that you cannot separate capital from technique.
Mhm.
So this is technique is not a mean, but the capital and technique is the same. And I think in this meaning, Heidegger's question about the technique, if read in a more, how do you say, really more philosophical, radical way, we understand how he gave us hints in this sense. But this is not the most important. But what is important with this new constellation, so in which the capital is finance capitalism, is credit capitalism. We have all this question, also the Italian Lazzarato discussing the capital as a capital of credits and debts. But this is, of course, is a ode. This is what is the structure of the capital in connection to the Industrial Revolution. But what is important is how, in this new constellation, this cyber financial capital, technical capital, mediatic capitalism, let us say all this, is what is about is to destroy our sense of existence.
Yeah.
This is much more radical
Mhm.
than to censor someone to not do that, or to order to only do this other thing. So the destruction of the sense of reality, this is much more radical and destructive. Really, is the axle of this necropolitics, and this is what has to be understood, because it's much more than fake news or supposed truth, all these labels that are coined by journalists and so on, and everybody adhere to that and does not think further or think deeply. What does it mean? It means the destruction of the sense of existence, when we no longer can feel existence. We no longer have, so much more dangerous than disconnected the present with the past and the future in a kind of presentism of this carpe diem of consumption. Everything now I have to have, and so on and so on. It's much more deeper and much more violent is the destruction of the link to the present, to existence as such. So this is in reaction to your first comment. So I think this is important. And of course, what we miss, or what is really having a big default, is of the sense of existence, I think. For the second point, these descriptions of the Korean philosopher or even Hartmut Rosa, some kind of German, about descriptions, a kind of diagnosis of the times. We are rushing, we are productive, we don't stop, or we are accelerating, we should not accelerate, we should, when some people say, I've heard once, if you are in a line waiting in the bank, So go give, instead of being like this, pushing the line because you want to come to go and resolve your problems, give some steps back, go back. People say like this. So, but these are very concrete diagnosis of everydayness, and very good. Of course, we make this kind of descriptions when we are standing in the streets or waiting for the fire to be red or green that I can pass. So we can talk with people in the streets and we have this diagnosis. But the very problem is to understand really what happened with the very structure of being itself. So you name ontology. So this process of deontologization for the sake of enabling whatsoever ontologization. So you can do whatever you want with everything. So, and this appears as freedom. No, we are not bound. We're no longer bound to a body, to a soul, to a spirit. So we are totally free. But this means a slavery of the body, of the soul, and the spirit. Of this freedom, because this is not really freedom. So, and then, so we have a problem. What is freedom? All the liberal capitalist discourse is a discourse on freedom. No? So, what's freedom? We have a moment in which philosophy itself seems to have lost its sense and meaning. And maybe it has. Maybe we have to do with the death, not of God, not of the man, of the art, but with the death of philosophy, of a certain way of thinking, and a certain logic, and a certain dialectics, and a certain way of addressing the relation between praxis and thought. So we have a really challenge to think otherwise.
That's
so, and even to experience the urgency to maybe distinguish act from action.
Say more.
That means maybe because we have a certain way of understanding praxis and action, which is inframed by the very notion of production and product. So even Heidegger, when discussing what is the essence of art, and he goes back to the Greek techne, he's talking about Hervorbringung, so that is the producere, this is the production, so putting ahead something that can be pursued. We have a notion, we have the whole German idealism discussion, organicity, organism, very connected and almost impossible to disconnect from a sense of organization. So we have already Leibniz understood human or vital organism as an organization. So we have this autonomy and automation already since many centuries in different concepts. But the question is how to think the doing otherwise than product and production. Then otherwise than falling back to this logic of production productivity, which is the logic of industrial revolution, even in our of many called post-industrial society. So what does it mean when Lenin has taken again the question about what to do we could have been transformed this question in many variations, how to do, what to do. But maybe the problem is how to undo a certain notion of doing or a certain praxis of praxis. Very radical, very difficult, because you don't have a solution that can propose as a kind of this is how to do. I think this is the point in which what we have called art, and I think this is now a total problematic concept, has to say something, because art is not about other products than the productive products. It is about another doing of the doing, another making of the making. So maybe this is what we have to learn, and that's why for me, poetry
I was
has,
about to say poiesis instead of techne or craft.
yes,
Mhm.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and poiesis, even in this different writing of the word that the French poet Paul Valéry has insisted on, not poetic, but poetic. Now trying to do just some, but these are not, as I say, solutions, but they are hints that puts our move in thought and sensibility, because we have a continuous desensibilization of sensibility. We have ressentiment, Nietzsche. We say capitalism in political economy, but in philosophy we call this nihilism. So we have an urgent to really deepen the problem of nihilism, I think. And so there are many important tasks, but I'm not sure that philosophy can accomplish them. But we don't have other resource than this huge philosophical tradition. But maybe if you are more, if you really, really are engaged with not saving, but really insist in existing. I would call more than resistance is we have to insist in existing, then maybe this.
Oh, wow. Thank you. This is so important. I mean, if any of you wants to ask a question, please jump in. I would love to hear your voices, see your faces. Please. While you were talking again, I felt deeply touched. I mean, my practical case. When you said probably philosophy is dead, and we need to find a new way to tackle these problems, to think, who knows if thinking, feeling, creating these problems, my classes are online. I mean, thank God, okay, we have technology that can provide education everywhere at any time you need and so on. But it's a technology that is changing us. I mean, it's devastating for me not being able to connect to, you know, as we were saying at the beginning of this talk, seeing the people. I mean, I know, again, the capital, as you were saying, they need to work, they need to produce, they need to, you know, to survive, to pay the rent and so on. So education is something you do in between. You do as best as you can in the way you can. But that poses the question for me as a teacher and as a philosopher, how to how to think of this challenge, how to insist to exist. I mean, this is so beautiful. This is exactly where I am. Which way? It's and the exercise of presence you were talking about at the beginning, in response to my comment, yes, I resonate completely with that. And I see the huge challenge that technology poses us because we are not this being, we are not this body. I mean, we are also this body, but the exercise of presence is so complex with all these mutations uh, we, we are going through in our being that yeah, we need to come up with new images. And I'm in crisis, clearly. I mean, I don't know what teaching is for me anymore. I've been teaching since I'm 26, and now I'm 46. 20 years. What is it teaching for me? What does it mean? What is it learning for my students? I'm completely in process.
You know, during the military dictatorship in Brazil,
Ah.
the militaries, we had a very fragile public education. I mean, for very primary, so the beginning of the years of the school, that was built in the 30s and 40s, very fragile because so huge social inequality in Brazil and so terrible economical injustice, social injustice, racial, and all these questions. But one of the first things that the military made was to finish, so to no longer pay these very poor teachers in the countryside for very poor people, to leave them in ignorance. This is really a very good weapon and a way of controlling. Better than to indoctrinate with ideas. It's much more, how to say, effective, could say. And transferring the very little budget of the cultural ministry of culture education to the big media concern of the time. So the phenomenon you see in Italy as well. And when you do that, and also this TV, the big TV, the television, it's called, this big concern is called Globo. I always say that in Brazil, globalization was through globalization was this true media, was to appropriate the incredible richness of our traditional feasts and rituals and different. It is very rich. Brazil is very rich culturally. It's not only samba, which is enormously rich in itself, but there are many traditions and many kinds of dances and rituals and so on. But when you do that, you will appropriate the force of tradition. This is something that Pasolini was very interested in. He was really working with this. Because it's not tradition in the sense of reactionary, of stagnated forms. But we can no longer make the distinction because it has become so ambiguous, put together. That's the problem. We need very subtle visions and listening and thought to distinguish what seems to be the same, but it's not the same. So this is the most difficult. And I think that what is the big challenge is that now with automation, I think that our ways of learning, academy, university, is really in coming to a moment in which it is no longer being able to exist as it was, or it has to really, I don't know if reinvent, but invent forms. This is the problem. Because, every thesis we write in academy is for the most part, I've been teaching since 81, almost 70. And I see the thesis, yes, all the theses all over the world, they are the same. They have some structure, of course. They are good thoughts and new, but the form, the academic form. Otherwise, you don't get your article in a peer review. You don't get the credits. You cannot go further in the career. But now the ChatGPT and AI, they can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And more sophisticated, because the more we write dissertations, the more the AI and ChatGPT will be better to reproduce. So, but we have to search other ways of thinking together. That's the point. What is thinking together? Thought is always together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, always. Even if you are totally alone in totally alone in the tower, you are thinking together, because thought is the element of thought, is the air, is another element, elementality of thought. So is respiration, huh? And so we have to have some courage. But the problem now we have is a huge problem. Is the problem of unemployment? Is the problem of the Uber? You call Uber in America as well? Uber?
Yeah.
Uber? Uberization of work. Every work. Management, self-management. This is the names for unemployment. So the rates, rates of the unemployees. So the country says, oh, we don't have unemployment. Yes, because what you call unemployment, now you are calling self-management, but this is unemployed. So what happens with the state, which is being used to undermine the state? That's what you can see with Trump administration very clearly. Use the name of the state to undermine the state, because what we have is an enterprise. The state is an enterprise. More and more. But we need the form, we need the word of the state. So, because this is much more effective to do the destruction of politics, meaning the destruction of common life. So I think that if we understand the radicality of this mutation, you really acknowledge it's about a mutation, and facing which we are facing, and that means also that we don't have the conceptuality, but we have the challenge to also change our way of thinking. So this is an incredible chance.
It's an incredible chance.
But we are facing terrible dangers. And the big danger is really, we have a humanity that have no way to survive. I mean, maybe with people say, "Oh, you are so pessimist. I get depressed when I listen to you." Maybe yes, we have to be not depressed, but you have to face the problem and find. So I was thinking that, not that you feel so depressed with my not the diagnosis. I hope it's not really a diagnostic, but a attempt to understand is that in Norwegian, for instance, recently I discovered something I didn't, it doesn't exist in Sweden. The artists, you know that visual artists, they are the closest to capitalism. Capitalism and visual art, you know, vision arts, you have to, people are so stealing paintings in the Louvre. Yeah, this has to do with how the stocks values. It has to do with, since the Nazi, we have to steal the works of art because it has to do with how this financial capital is organized. There is a very good book on that written by a Portuguese philosopher, Tomás Maia, reason about that. But how art and capitalism are together. But what is interesting is in the visual artist, is in the field of artistic field that has more money. No? The poor musicians or the pure, I don't know, they are starving and so on. But in Norwegian, they made a kind of society in which the very successful Norwegian visual artists, which earn a lot of money, these few people, they pay their taxes, they have to pay for the state and so on. They are in Norwegian, but they have also a kind of percent, which is a kind of a fund. I don't know how to say in English, fund that give scholarships decided by the artists to the young artists who have no work.
That's nice.
They share. So maybe we have to find ways of sharing that could contribute to together search for new forms, other forms. We have to search together other forms. And then, in this sense, there is no solution. They are not solutions, but they shows maybe some
Direction.
hints, of possibilities. No? But we are facing now war, terrible wars in which the heavens substitute stars with drones, substitute constellations with terrible weapons. Everything to test automatization of death. Because we have to do with automation of life, but we have to do with automation of death. This is very serious.
Yeah.
No? So we have to think more this issue of automation, I think, my view.
I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And this image of the space, we look and the starry sky at night, and yeah, I felt that too, completely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcia. Is there anyone who wants, this is your last chance for a question. The video will be on YouTube, so if in the future you have a question and the speaker wants to answer, we can still do it later on. But since you're here, maybe anyone? not really.
Hello,
No.
ma'am.
Oh, great.
Uh,
Hi.
my name is Nandan. I would like to know your thoughts on the impact of war on the society, how it leads to massive destruction that leads to an end of human civilization.
The last part I didn't understand, Nandan. I'm sorry. That mass destruction leads to
The end of human civilization.
the end of human civilization. How can I say? The risk of the end of human civilization is there, of course, with nuclear age. So it's not about destruction, it's about total destruction. Total destruction means the end of human civilization, but also the end maybe of nature as well, or a part of nature. No? So, of course, this is a possibility. I don't know if you had a specific question on that. If you are asking if I believe, I don't know if it's a question of belief, it's a question of possibility. For the first time, but since the very creation of the atom bomb, this is a possibility.
Definitely, ma'am. As the situation of today we are seeing around us leads to a question that it's just a second away for someone with power to disrupt the entire human civilization.
Yes, you know, you have an how to say, the possibility for amplification of a big destruction, like the old moments of Rome. You could just inflame, put in fire the whole city or the whole world. Günther Anders saw that Susie had a good wrote. He was thinking about that, but in order, this means it is Caligula, you know. Albert Camus' piece called Caligula. It is the terrible pleasure of destruction, which in Camus' piece, Caligula says is great, bigger, a much bigger pleasure than of creation, because it is the craziness of a total control of life through death. The possibility is always there, I think, since the first moment a human being was born. It's hard to say what I'm going to say, what I've said, but I think so. You know, Schelling's treatise on human freedom and the treatise about evil. So, human freedom is the capacity of good and evil, good and evil. This is a very difficult text, but very interesting to rethink, because he is understanding the emergence of human consciousness, human beings, human species in nature as the moment of a separation of separation, because nature is a continuous separation in the sense of continuous generation of multiple forms. Nature means romantic or for sharing this force of forming force, which is the force to produce infinite, finite forms of life. But this happens, this is the Schellinian romantic framework. Now we can also question, but it's interesting to begin with. Then it says, these infinite, finite forms of life, they are a separation within nature through which the bound with nature is assured, because nature is othering, is a continuous othering of itself. But human species is also a form of life in nature, which separates from nature, but separates from separation, and aims to build a realm of its own. This is the birth of selfhood. That's why evil in Schelling has to do with this terrible moment, tragical moment in nature in which the othering of nature is other itself. And then this selfhood. I don't know if this can contribute to a question, but if it made some sense.
Definitely, nature will dilute itself into its forms. We can say that as humans, we are made out of nature and we will go into nature again. And the process of continuous creation will continue, according to me. As
Mm-hmm.
I'm an Indian, so in Indian philosophy, there is a constant concept of creation.
Mm-hmm.
The world is somewhere it is happening description, so somewhere the creation is also ongoing.
Yeah.
It's a contiguous process.
What is
We
important? Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
no, please.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
what is important when we say that, as you said, and we bring this very deep metaphysical vision from the Indian tradition, philosophical tradition. What is very important is that this is not um, confused with irresponsibility. I mean, okay, because it is like this, total destruction can happen because nature continues to create itself. Of course, this is a possibility to think, but I think that it's much more challenging and important to see that we can think both together. That means we know that nature continues to create whatsoever, but this means a double engaged responsibility in relation to the total destruction of nature and the world now. You understand what I mean?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Mm.
Do you think, ma'am, that the universe has set its own deadline, its own expiry? Anything that causes it, it's just a reason, but the ultimate destruction time is set once the creation of the universe.
Yes, but you know, we have um, not all philosophers. Um, if we think about, if you read Spinoza, we see that not all philosophers thought about creation or life in terms of creation. Spinoza, for instance, is quite interesting because really he wants to live this framework of creation. And for him, even the Greeks, they didn't thought that the universe is created in a certain moment of time. It says that the world is always there. So there is not a beginning in time and not an end in time. It is the ongoing of existence. So that's why I think that your questions, they belong to this framework of creation, but maybe we could think otherwise. Or maybe we could understand creation otherwise, not as an event in a point. And then that also leads us to think about death event on another point, time, no?
Definitely, ma'am. That's a wonderful thought, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a question, Adam.
Thank you so much for being with us today, for those who are here in the audience, and Hugh. Yeah, Marcia, it was fantastic to be able to think together and try to see to peek into this new form that is about to accompany us. Let's see. It was lovely to meet you, even though just from distance. So really heartfelt thanks for this presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and the work you do.
Thank you, Susie, for the opportunity to meet you